Western Teacher Live, talking about public education, unionism and much more.
Hello and welcome to Western Teacher Live, the podcast of the State School Teachers Union of Western Australia. My name is Bob Figg and I'm delighted to welcome back for the podcast over a bit of a hiatus, Matt Jarman, the president of the SSTUWA. Matt, it's been a busy time for the union with the vote on the schools agreement in principle taking place. That is now completed. So how did it end up?
Well, it's ended up with a 70% membership ballot in agreement for the agreement in principle. Most importantly, and I think most impressively, we've had just short of 8,000 members who participated in that vote, which is around about the 47% mark for a non-voting, compulsory non-voting organisation. That is extraordinary, and I'm really, really pleased. And as you said in your opener, it's been a very busy period for the union. Well, the union are the members of the SSTU, so it's been not just a busy period of time for those people who work within the building of One West Place, but most importantly for all of our union membership across the entire state. So we're very grateful for all the active engagement that we've had from our membership and look forward to continue to represent and work with them as we implement this EBA 23.
And you got a massive turnout for the day of action on April, half-day action on the 23rd of April. It was an amazing feeling to be part of that. Fill in the Matagarup Bridge, then the process gets a bit different, doesn't it? Because obviously not everybody's going to be fully in favour of every aspect of the agreement. So you need some sort of spirited and two-way discussions. Yeah,
I mean, I'll never forget the 23rd of April, 12,000, whatever the final number was of people walking across the bridge. But also, I guess I was right at the coalface watching the government's response to that powerful demonstration, and not just here in Perth, but across every one of those 20 regional locations where we had members effectively saying the same thing in 21 different physical locations, which in of itself is extraordinary. But the EBA 23 demonstrates that members had impact because the government responded over the next 10 days from that march with an EBA offer that was significantly altered from the second offer that they had provided. So never in my mind will I ever doubt the power of the membership and the power of the union to get the government's attention when the government's attention is not focused on what it is that we're talking about. And that's been the case for the last 18 months. So all power to the membership.
And it was about 20 different things that had an improvement. I think 19 plus a small increase in the salary component. And then it was a matter of sharing all that information to give the 8,000 people who took part in the ballot a chance to assess all sides, not to hard sell, but to say, look, this is why we think this is the best deal we can get for the moment.
One of the big challenges, maybe unforeseen, but organisers from the office through to members in meetings all around the state translating all of that information that came from all of those new components in the third offer. Huge information piece for everybody to grapple with, and at a time when they're writing reports and running their schools and running their classrooms and having very busy lives. So there was a lot of change from the second to the third offer and a lot that had to be communicated and translated and discussed, thought through before the ballot obviously became open and active. So an enormous amount of work by everybody, and whether were a member of the union or you're an organiser throughout most of term two.
And in terms of the agreement, we've said that the vote was carried by 70% to about 29.5%, with a few abstentions as well as is part of the process. So what happens and what is happening now, you've got the sign-off, the endorsement of the members. You then take it presumably to the employer, being the government, state government. So where are we at now and what's happening as we go forward?
Well, there's an enormous amount of work underway right now, and that's what we just generally refer to as the technical amendments phase, where we convert the common language of what we've been talking about for the last 8 weeks into general agreement award language. So that in itself is a very industrial and legally platformed discussion and a lot of work that has to be done. A lot of work and meetings underway at the moment with Labour Relations in the department before getting that wording right, before we can then lodge it with the Commission. So I just want to reassure the membership that work has been underway the day after the ballot was concluded. It doesn't matter about the school break at all. We've been hard at work on that, and we've got a lot of work to do because there's a lot in the offer, a lot of translation of leave conditions and things like that. So we're underway. We're going at a pretty good clip at the moment, and a series of meetings all throughout the next couple of weeks try to make sure that that's getting bedded down before we can lodge it into the Commission. Once it's lodged in the Commission, we're in the hands of the Commission. Depends really upon the schedule and what we submit. And then following on from that, the registration of the agreement and then the conditions and the back pay that flow, which, I really hope can be done in the same sort of timeline that we've seen in the past. But there's a few things there that we can't control. What we can control is how much work we put in now to those technical amendments and all of those new conditions, which we are really focused upon.
And we're talking there about the Western Australian Industrial Relations Commission, which is the umpire, as it were, in these processes until they actually sign off on the final version of the agreement. That's the process you're going through at the moment. And, of course, complicating that perhaps a little, Matt, is there's some really big changes. For example, the workload task force. So presumably there'll be certain wording in the agreement, but under that there needs to be a layer of process and agreed steps that people can take to refer items to the new ministerial workload task force. One of the biggest gains, I think, in the agreement, most people would agree. Presumably that work also is carrying on because you've got to be ready for all that to slot into place, almost in parallel with the final document going to the Commission.
Well, during Term 3 we'll have our district council meetings, but you can't ask for a lot of change and then complain that there's a lot of work to do to implement that change. So we're certainly not going to do that, but not only the workload ministerial task force, but also significant directional change to documented plans and professional learning and senior teacher and a range of other workplace workload related conditions. So there is a lot of work to do, a lot of work to communicate, and that'll commence through the district councils and then through other material that we publish to help members understand what all of those new conditions mean for them. And that work will be running parallel to the technical amendments and the submission period into the WAIRC. So, we have asked for a lot. We've got a lot out of the agreement, and now there's a lot of work to do as a consequence of that, which we look forward to doing.
And one of the areas that members were especially engaged in was the issue of class sizes, because obviously the ideal outcome for the union would have been a flat agreement that all class sizes will be lowered and here's all the numbers. The government put cost implications across that prevented them coming fully to the party, but they've made a number of concessions. Is the union happy with where that sits, or is there more work to be done around class sizes in addition to what's been gained through this agreement in principle?
There's much more work to be done around the base size of classrooms. Here in WA, we contest that they're still far too large, particularly in the year 4 to 10 bracket, but also in KP and year 1 to 3 as well. Practical classes is something that we can sit down and discuss with the department about. But what we have got from EBA 23 is how those classes in the future will be configured. And that is important and significant work that will hopefully one day complement reduced class sizes. At the June State Council, delegates agreed across the floor to support, and they even participated in a workshop around what a class size campaign publicly facing should look like. And of course here in WA we've got the March 2025 state election. So we have a commitment from our delegates at State Council to commit to a public-facing class size campaign, and that work is also underway at the moment and very, very important. And hopefully we'll get the result that we're seeking because then that will complement what we've got in terms of class size configuration that will go into the general agreement as a result of members coming out on strike on the 23rd of April, because that wasn't in there before that.
Okay, that's it's good, and a whole lot of quite technical things that you've mentioned before around the senior teachers, the new process for them, and the process of advancement for people to take up level 3 teaching positions and trying their hand at being a principal with a right of return. from country areas, for example. I suppose over the much longer period, there will also be some efforts to look at the issue of teachers who are in the regions and would like to come and try working in the metro area or return to the metro area. Something that the the IPS system really made very, very difficult. So it's like a never-ending process, isn't it? You'll get significant movements in some areas, but there's still other things to keep working at.
Well, what we've got to hook ourselves or to anchor ourselves down to is, in this period of time, is the Facing the Facts report, which really itemised 47 different recommendations, and staff mobility, servicing country schools, staff placement is all highlighted within Facing the Facts. And we've achieved quite a significant amount with regards to those for this 3-year agreement. People will be able to return to their permanent position here in the Metropolitan or the Southwest and go out to one of the other country locations around WA for 3 years. And that is a significant shift. And the school leaders, the right of return, it's all encompassed there for both teachers and school leaders. So IPS in of itself isn't up for review, although Facing the Facts is quite clear about what it recommends, that it does need to be independently reviewed for the first time since it was fully implemented in 2011. And when you stop and think about that, it's actually extraordinary that we haven't had a full independent review of the consequences of IPS since that time. But that's what Facing the Facts asks for, and nothing more than that. There is a significant amount of work to do in terms of the blueprint going forward. Facing the Facts is the anchor that I'd recommend to members that they refer back to, but also the Minister's own workload reduction red tape report. There's a significant amount in there as well for us to be guided by as we try to achieve better results for our members around workload reduction and compliance.
And of course, in the context of Facing the Facts, a number of community groups and pretty much every major stakeholder in the education sector in Western Australia made submissions to Dr. Lawrence's review, which led us to Facing the Facts. How much do you go back and sort of complete the loop with those organisations and seek their support for further work in that conversation about public education?
Well, quite interestingly, many of those organisations continue to come back to the SSTU to ask, how can we help? We want to carry this forward. We really believe in this. So we are coordinating a series of organisations and meetings with multiple government and charity and non-profit-based organisations to propel the work of Facing the Facts forward. In effect, we've become a coordinator for those meetings, which is terrific to know that there are many, many people out there across the WA community who support the recommendations and they want to see them land. So they're advocating on our behalf alongside us with government. And some really very vocal and powerfully placed organisations as well, as most of them are, who submitted to Facing the Facts. So a lot of work, and it's certainly not going to go away. We've made a significant decision through the executive to make sure that it's properly resourced for a 2-year period before we have a look to see where we're up to. But it is important to note that EBA 23 has landed 19 of those 47 recommendations. And I've said it many times before, had you said to me on November 6 last year when we launched publicly Facing the Facts, I would have been staggered to think that almost 50% of those recommendations would have been achieved in that EBA, but they have been. That's an absolute fact. So we'll continue to move forward on the other recommendations and try to implement what's there, and hopefully the community organisations will stay with us for the next 18 months.
Well, we hope they certainly will. And of course, the flowing behind all of that at the federal level and state level is the issue of funding and the need for the minimum requirements of the schooling resource standard to be met. Now, Western Australia's moved fairly fast ahead of the rest of the country in terms of the preliminary process for this, and the state government is saying, we're going to give you 100% funding. But in actual fact, because of the complications within the funding agreement under the previous Turnbull government when they changed things, what we're being offered at the moment is not 100%, is it? It's 96%, and 96% is not 100%.
And that gap is worth about $225 million this year, so it is a significant amount of money to argue over. The state government position is quite simple. They believe that shaving off that 4% to pay for painting and whatever other minor works the public school system needs is part of our federal funding. Our position is also quite simple, that it's 100% federal funding, state contribution to schools, 100% co-contribution through to our schools so they can be better resourced on the ground for our members, for students and for parents and for communities. That gap is, as I said, $220 million. It's a significant amount of money to be spread around the 850 public schools in our state. So we do have a different view to what the state government does around that co-contribution agreement. However, the $1.6 billion statement of intent that was announced by Minister Booty earlier on in the year does put us into a more progressive position than we would have been and certainly are compared to some of the other big states around the country. We want 100% federal funding, and we want that money to go from federal state coffers directly to schools. That's how it works for private schools, and we believe that's how it should work for public schools. And until we get through that contest with the state and federal government agreement, then we're not going to be in the same place together.
And of course, again, one of the things that looms over the whole process, and one of the reasons is that you need to retain teachers and to get more and more people into the profession, the best of the students becoming the best of the teachers. It's a very competitive global marketplace, and it was interesting a couple of weeks ago, following the general election in the United Kingdom, pledges there that they want to bring in 6,500 new teachers into the system in the UK. I wonder where they're going to start looking for those, Matt.
Well, certainly there's about 160 scattered around WA right now, as I understand it. So, look, I think that this EBA is going to be a real challenge for the government to get all of it implemented by the beginning of next year. In terms of everything that we expect, there's a lot of conditions in there. I think the state government's going to be really hoping it works, because if this is a significant package, EBA 23, and if it still doesn't fill all the vacancies we've got, particularly in our rural schools, then that's on the department for not promoting the value of going out there enough, and that's also on the government for not investing enough. We've been turning around and saying quite clearly that class sizes are something that needs to be invested in by a very wealthy state government. It's not just for workload reduction of teachers or for their ability to do their job better as to the standard they wish to do it, but it's also better for educational outcomes and for schools in metropolitan and country WA. So I do hope that the state government is keeping an eye on the workforce, because we are still in the middle of a glut and we still need to fix the issue. And hopefully EBA 23, and I'm sure they are hoping that EBA 23 goes a long way to fixing it. But at the end of the day, we'll watch and let the market make a decision for itself. If our members don't feel safe, if our members don't feel as if they're being remunerated properly or they can do better elsewhere, then the government still has a problem.
And let's hope that they do recognise all of those issues and things like grow in the rural and regional schools. But Matt, it's been, nearly 18 months since the first negotiations began for this general agreement. Then you've had this, as we've talked about, this long process around educating, giving members as much information as possible and then conducting the vote. That's been a process that members have contributed to right from the start, through district councils, through the state council, and then through the voting process, and of course the actions that we mentioned culminating in that half day of action on the 23rd of April, a march across Madagarrett Bridge to Gloucester Park, and regional events from the Christmas Islands down to Esperance. You must be very grateful for the members for the way they've contributed to this process, whether they were supportive of the agreement in the actual vote or not. They've all played their part.
I've told many, many people that working for and within the SSTU, it is one of the most democratically run organisations that I've ever witnessed or been part of. It's absolutely fantastic. What I would say to all of our new members and to all of those members who participated on the 23rd of April for the first time and all of the work leading up to that is that your engagement is still very much needed now. We have a significant number of new branches around the state. We have union rep time, that is one of the legacy wins from EBA 23 in the offer. So the provision and the resources now there, we really need those branches to be well organised so that when we need to go forward and challenge government, we're well organised, because many members around the state noticed that was something that could have been done a little bit better. And also workload advisory discussions at the school level. That's the lowest level to resolve matters. A lot of members discovered during the course of semester one that they were being asked to do a lot of things that were already in the general agreement, that they didn't need to be doing or that somebody else should be doing. So again, workload management at the school level through the branch, it's what it's there in part for, but also having well-organised branches. The time commitment is not as significant as people may think that it is or assume that it is, and I absolutely understand and have lived and understand the pressure of being a teacher and a school leader and how busy life is, but here we come to a position in time where we say we really need a well-organised branch and we're not quite there yet. So going forward from now, every individual branch, well organised, active member engagement. Let's land the EBA 23, and then let's have a bit of a reflection to see where we're up to and work on the next challenge.
And there's always another challenge just round the corner. So thank you to Matt Jarman, President of the SSTUWA. A big thank you to all of our members and all of you listening to the Western Teacher Live podcast. We're delighted that having added this to our comms mix, we've had well over 1,000 downloads already, and we're back in the saddle now after a brief hiatus, as I mentioned, while the vote process was underway. So thank you very much for joining us. Tell your friends and get them to join us too. So we look forward to having you join us again on Western Teacher Live.
Western Teacher Live, cutting through noise on public education and union issues.